Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about what a great IDEA. This is a brief overview of special education for parents and for families. So let's talk about what we're going to learn today. Our overall goal today is to give you a basic understanding of special education in the state of Georgia. We're going to talk about what is special education, the basic components of the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and that is IDEA, how the process of special education works specifically in Georgia. And we're going to talk about things like Childline, referrals, evaluations, and eligibility. In the second half of this presentation, we're going to go into IEP teams and IEP team meetings, as well as how do you resolve disputes and where do you go if you need more information than what's in these presentations today. So let's talk first about what special education is. The most important thing to remember about this is that special education is a service that is provided to your child to help them with their academic and functional needs. It is not a place. It's not a classroom that your child gets sent to. It's not a hallway that houses these classrooms, but rather it's a service that gets provided to your child in whatever environment is appropriate. Special education also includes specially designed instruction specific to your child's needs. It's available at no cost to parents, and it's provided in the most typical setting that's appropriate for your child. So now let's talk about IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is a federal special education law that was passed, so it applies to all 50 states. In it refers to each child receiving a free and appropriate public education, or what we call FAPE, F-A-P-E. Appropriate is the most difficult piece of that, because what I consider to be appropriate may be very different than what you consider to be appropriate. And let me give you an example of that. Let's say we've just gone and bought some groceries together, and we both agree on the fact that we need to keep those groceries cold. In your mind, that may mean us going out and purchasing a brand new, beautiful stainless steel refrigerator with all the bells and whistles on it. But in my mind, that may be going out and buying an Igloo cooler and a bag of ice. Now, both of these things are going to keep our food cold, and both of these things are appropriate. But you can see that they're both very, very different in how we provide services to your child. One of the things that IDEA really specifically honed in on is the end result. The law looks to get your child prepared to receive further education, employment, and/or independent living. So it's really focused on what happens after we get out of school. It also protects the rights of children and their parents. So what does this all mean? And how does this kind of trickle down to you? Well, remember that IDEA is a federal law that includes regulations. Once that law is passed, it's given to the states. All 50 states are required to follow IDEA. But they're given a little bit of flexibility as to how they implement the law. So Georgia takes the law and they look at it and they decide for their population of students, what is the best way to implement this? And they come up with their own rules and regulations so that they can meet the qualifications of the law. From there, the state passes that down to the local districts, who also have a little bit of flexibility as to how they implement the federal rules and regulations as well as the state rules and regulations. And this is one of the reasons why, if you're talking to a friend or a relative that lives in a different state, things may be a little bit different there. Things may be done just a little bit differently. Again, remember that all of the states are required to follow the rules and regulations that are written in IDEA. However, some of the nuances about that could look a little different from state to state. All right, so how does this apply in Georgia and who's responsible for what? IDEA was written actually in 4 parts. Part A goes into what the feeling was and what Congress wanted the law to accomplish. Part B talks specifically about school-aged children. So we're talking about children ages 3 to 22, meaning their 22nd birthday. And because we're talking about school-aged children, this is managed by the Department of Education here in the state of Georgia. Part C is our early intervention piece, and that is talking specifically about children aged birth to age 3. It is managed by our Department of Public Health here in Georgia. You also might hear a lot about the Babies Can't Wait program, and that is part of this early intervention program for Georgia. Part D of IDEA goes into different projects and research that are going to be done, as well as mandating that each state have a parent training and information center. The Parent Training and Information Center is required to do trainings and that sort of thing and to get information out to parents about what the law is about and what their rights are under the law. So in Georgia, the Parent Training and Information Center is Parent to Parent of Georgia. And this training that is coming to you today is a result of Part D of IDEA. All right, so how does IDEA work? How does the education process work? The first thing you need to remember is there are a lot of steps that go into IDEA. And we don't expect you to remember all the steps or all the information that we're talking about today. One of the places that you can go that will give you all of this information is the Department of Education's website. There's something on there called the Georgia Implementation Manual. And it's got a lot of information into it. It's a pretty huge document. But it's a great thing to go and check out so that you have a good resource if you're needing to get more information on these topics. So let's talk about the steps in order. The first step is child fine. Now, what is child fine? The law in IDEA specified that the states are required to identify, locate, and evaluate children who are suspected of having a disability and may need special education and related services in order to help them learn and function in the school environment. Now, different ways that they may do child fine include they may put information in newspapers about these services that are available to children. They may also use television spots and that sort of thing. They will target public and private child care centers and let them know what services are available and how to refer a child if they feel like there might be a need. And they'll also target preschools, public and private preschools, such as our Georgia pre-K system here in Georgia, or private preschools that different children may attend, letting them know what different services are available and how a child can be referred to those services. So what is a referral? Referral is really kind of a fancy word for an evaluation, taking a look at a child and determining whether or not they're appropriate for special education services here in the state of Georgia. This request will always be made in writing. The school may make the request. If so, again, they will send you something in writing, and nothing can be done until they receive parental consent in writing back from you saying, yes, I agree, my child should be evaluated. If your answer is no, the school is not allowed under IDEA to proceed evaluating your child. Another way that a referral or evaluation can be done is that a parent may ask for it. You may see some things in your child that you feel special education services may be able to help them overcome. It's important to remember that a parent can do this at any time. You don't have to wait for the school system to initiate that request. You can make that request at any time. The request should always be made in writing. And you should be very specific in there that you are asking for this evaluation to see if your child is eligible for special education services. You should also include any kind of background or resources that you have available that support your reasoning for why you're asking for this evaluation. That may include perhaps a report from a developmental pediatrician, maybe a report from an occupational therapist or a speech therapist. It can include information that you have from a private preschool teacher, or maybe even a Boy Scout or Girl Scout troop leader and what they've seen with your child. From there, the school really has three options. The school may say, yes, we agree. We are seeing some things with your child as well, and we feel like an evaluation is appropriate. If that happens, again, you will receive that request in writing, and the school will need to receive your written consent, allowing them to proceed. The school may say no. It may say, no, we're really not seeing those things with your child in the academic environment. If that's the case, you can then refer to your parental rights and determine what your next steps might be. The third thing the school may say is, let's try something else first. And that may include different teaching methods, strategies and interventions, and maybe some accommodations, such as extended testing time, or being tested in a smaller environment, or even placement in the classroom as an accommodation that might help your child. Now, if your child is already receiving some strategies and interventions from their student support team or SST team, the team may say, before we do the evaluation, let's try some different interventions and strategies. Let's put some additional things in place and see if that might be helpful for your child. And any information that gets gathered for that can be very useful in the evaluation process if it's still determined that an evaluation is needed after that. Now, if your child is not already receiving any kind of intervention services, then a team may be put together, which again is called the Student Support Team or SST team. That team may look at different strategies and interventions that may help your child prior to an evaluation being done or at the same time that the evaluation process is occurring. That information may then be used in the evaluation process, or those interventions may have been enough and it may be determined by the team that your child is no longer in need of an evaluation. Those strategies and interventions have worked to overcome the issues that your child is having in the educational setting. In rare cases, the school system may determine that the disability is significant enough where the intervention process does not need to be done, and they may go directly into an evaluation. So what is an evaluation, and why should you want an evaluation to be done on your child? The first thing an evaluation does is it looks to see if your child has a disability and needs special education and related services to help them in the educational environment. The second reason might be to understand your child's strengths as well as your child's needs from an academic standpoint. And the third big reason is to make some educational decisions about your child so your child can be as successful as possible in the environment that they're in. And remember that even if your child doesn't qualify for educational services through this process, the information that will be gathered in the evaluation is going to be highly useful in developing a plan to help your child learn in the educational environment as well. All right, so what is eligibility and how is it determined? So a team is put together. This includes parents and professionals, and it's very important to remember that you are an integral part of this team. The school very much wants you to be involved in this team. And they will determine eligibility after reviewing all of the data that's been gathered from the evaluation process. The team is going to be required to ask two very critical questions under IDEA. Does this child have a disability? And under IDEA, there are 13 different categories of disabilities that are outlined. The state of Georgia follows IDEA with those 13 categories. So they're going to look to see if your child fits into one of those 13 categories. The next thing they're going to determine is there a significant educational impact where special education services could be put in place and be helpful with this child in their learning environment? If the answer to those two questions is yes, then your child is eligible for special education services. Now, if you do agree with this decision, what's going to happen is the school will arrange a planning meeting at the school. They're going to look at the times and place that are more accommodating to your schedule because, again, as I said before, the school really wants you to be involved in this process. The purpose of this meeting is going to be to review the evaluation results and then develop an individualized education program or an IEP that is specific to your child and your child's learning needs. What happens if your child is not eligible? The first thing that you can do is you can ask for the reasons that your child is not eligible in writing from the team, and that you want them to be very specific about what their reasonings were for denying the child eligibility. Once you read through those reasons, if you still disagree and still think that your child should be eligible for services, then the main thing that you need to do is to remember, always do things in writing. So you're going to write a letter and you're going to be very specific about why you disagree, what your reasoning is for why you disagree and you feel like your child should qualify. You're going to then ask for the different steps that you can take to try to resolve this disagreement, and you're going to follow through with those steps. But always remember that you can refer to your parental rights if an agreement just cannot be reached. And one of the things that you can do is follow the dispute resolution process and try to change the decision through dispute resolution. That can be a very successful way to do that. And we're going to go into a little more detail about that a little later on. This concludes what we're going to talk about today. We've talked about IDEA, and we've talked about how IDEA works in the state of Georgia and who's responsible for each piece of IDEA. We've talked about Childline and referrals and evaluations and eligibility. In our next session, which I hope you can join us for, we're going to be talking about IEP teams as well as IEP team meetings, and where can you go if you need to get more information beyond what's been in these presentations. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you in our next presentation.